Good evening, Switzerland. Welcome to the webinar series called Making Swiss Startups India Ready. This webinar series is now in its second stage, and we are glad to bring you another interesting topic this evening, which is City Spotlight, Startup Vibe of Young Bangalore. Why should Swiss startups be considering Bangalore as their preferred destination? What are the reasons that make Bangalore rank number 20th in the world as an innovation hub spot ahead of any Swiss city? I have with me today Sartaj Anand and Shashi Kiran Rao, two gentlemen who have played a very important role in bringing the ecosystem of Bangalore to what it is today. We will receive your questions later on. Do not forget to type your questions. You could use the tool on GoToWebinar panel. There's a section that says questions. You can type in your questions at any time. Do not hesitate. We will take all those questions one by one during this hour. I now give the mic to the first speaker today, Sartaj Anand.
Hey, thanks. So I'm Sartaj. I run a consulting firm called Egomonk, mostly into innovation and strategy. In addition to that, I curate TEDx Bangalore, with which we collaborated with swissnex on. So I'll just try to give you a brief overview of what I think makes India tick, what's interesting, and then I think a small subset of that obviously applies to Bangalore, and we are sort of fairly developed from the rest of the nation. And I think I'll try to sort of field some questions from you later on that specific uniqueness or difference. So the first part is billion strong. So India right now is 1.23 billion people. So that's a lot of people right now. 65% of that, surprisingly, is under the age of 35. And that itself creates massive opportunity from a talent perspective, from a consumer perspective, which is unheard of, because that's pretty much, we're talking to entire Europe, but it's still one country. The interesting part is that after a few years, 6 years from now, 2020, we are scheduled to be the youngest nation in the world, as well as the largest nation, after which we'll probably be stagnating a bit. And we will be at that point a $10 trillion economy. So that's the sort of opportunity that awaits startups and corporates that come here. However, that's not the entire deal, because India is a paradoxical nation, and hence I've said it's a tale of two Indias. If you take a look at numbers, 815 million people still inhabit rural spaces, and it's only a small fraction that's urban. That itself leads to massive migration towards the cities, and we're scheduled to hit 430 million odd people in another 6 years. What that creates is an opportunity if you're targeting the urban diaspora or even the rural one. This is interesting because it's not the complete sort of picture. For example, 1%, the top 1% in India owns approximately 48% of the national wealth. And that creates this disparity. On one hand, I referred to the massive talent pool that we have. There are almost 4 million graduates every year in India. And that's an opportunity right there. But we also see that there's a massive dropout rate. From the first grade to the 8th grade, we see 50% people dropping out, and every third illiterate person in the world is an Indian. So that's what I refer to when I say that's a tale of two Indias, and that's always been the case. The second part, which is sort of interesting now, is mobility. Everyone has a phone here. To give you a context, there are 934 million connections. Of them, 900 million connections are mobile. And we've just seen that leapfrog from the landline to the mobile revolution, and that's created an opportunity here. We currently, I think the city in particular is in a state of flux where we're moving to the next stage, where we're leapfrogging to smartness and 4G. What I mean by that is most of the penetration that we've had thus far has been 2G, and that's created our experiences as well in terms of what value-added services are there, what apps exist, all of that. But now we are seeing that 3G and 4G have become available to a point where price is not really a factor. To give you some context, 4G is priced the same as 3G, and it's going for around $4 for a gig of data. And that's creating opportunity again with this large youth market that's unheard of. In addition to that, if you look at Gartner and what they're saying, India is the largest smartphone market in the world, and we're growing at 167% year on year for the past decade now. So that's unheard of so far. The next part that I just want to sort of briefly touch upon is culture eats strategy for breakfast, and two parts here. The first part is software is eating the world. Now that's a well-known phenomenon which Mark Anderson laid out, and a lot of that software that's going to eat the world is going to come out of Bangalore. And this is the sort of next big hub, because we've seen something which the previous, I think, generation in India lacked, that's ambition. A lot of people here are saying, what can we do now? What's the next step? But I think a lot of people who are going to come here from abroad who aren't really knowing the market need to know the people that make it tick. And that's why I said software may be eating the world, but Bangalore eats idli. And idli is this rice cake, which is sort of very local here. And the larger picture here is that if you don't localize your process, your technology, it may not work. And probably it won't work. And in my experience, what I've seen are the couple of things that do make things work is tweaking your business model, or even customizing your offering. For example, recently Uber and a lot of the taxi sharing apps here, taxi apps here have integrated ride sharing just to boost traction. Now that's a perfect example of how people here see, okay, there's a huge market here, but it's price sensitive. Taxis may be out of reach for a lot of people, but they're saying, hey, let's just figure out a way, this is a feature. So ride sharing is now being pre-built into taxi apps and car rental apps, because they're saying that's a way that we can address this market, fulfill a need. So you may be good at what you're doing, but you may need to shift yourself a little bit, get out of your comfort zone to really make it work. The other thing I've seen a lot is there's a real ecosystem that's matured here, and being very frugal as a mindset. I think a lot of people here are scaling via partnerships. They're saying how we are very open with partnering, let's do something here and just ask and it can be done, right? So that's an interesting thing that I've seen that isn't unusual, I would say, in a couple of other markets. The other thing which is cool is that if it works in India, it'll work probably everywhere. So Bangalore in India, to be sort of generalist, is very anti-fragile. If you're building a model here, it has to be so robust that it will work in other nations and other places. So that's an interesting point. And the last part before we sort of go to Shashi and then take some questions is maturity. I think the millennial generation here is different and yet similar to the generation in Switzerland and in the US and a couple of other places. And this ambition that's come out is going to really be pivotal. We're going to move into more startups. People anyway think that startups are the next big thing. This is what's going to create massive employment here and really break through the ice. So if you ask anyone who wants to be the next big thing, I think the startup is the answer. And this, I think, extends to everything else. So hence we've seen cost really, which was a previous generation advantage coming to India, sort of move away and saying, okay, let's now focus on expertise, value-added services, because that cost may not be thing. We may not be as cheap as China, or we may not be as cheap as, say, Puerto Rico, a couple of other upcoming economies, but we have expertise now and a market which is interesting in its own right. Hence, I've said there's an evolution from business process outsourcing to knowledge process outsourcing. People who used to now previously field services are now offering and building products in-house to see, okay, how can we be global? How can we go from India to abroad, as well as serve our own market? And the last part is that earlier there used to be these sporadic events, but now it's a real ecosystem which has matured here. People are doing things like skill sharing. They're saying, hey, I know something which is very interesting. I'm an expert in JavaScript. You're good at design. Let's collaborate and build something together. If we can't, let's just exchange or barter our skills and further our own startups. And that's an interesting trend that I haven't seen previously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's about it.
Thank you so much, Sartaj. I'm sure we'll have questions coming our way because that's the message that swissnex has been delivering in Switzerland during our roadshows there, touching upon the people, the young generation, and also the domains that are coming up in Bangalore. So we can touch upon that later. Just before I give the word to Shashi, I just want to remind our audience that there is a question section in your GoToWebinar tool, and you can use that to type your questions. which we will start answering right after Shashi has spoken to us. All yours, Shashi.
Thanks, Prateek. Thanks, Sartaj. Hi, my name is Shashi, and I'm a co-founder of one of the key entrepreneurial events here in India called Construkt Festival, and I've also been an entrepreneur so far in my life. I've done about 3 startups, and one of them has been in the agri space, and I've also been deeply involved in developing the Bangalore ecosystem through a very strong not-for-profit organization based out of the valley. My experience has been more towards developing the ecosystem for startups that are locally based, and also looking at how we can connect markets sitting out of here to other European or American markets. And with that, I have done a lot of work in the with partners in the Nordic region and in the German region and places like that. So the way I see this whole thing is, you would be interested in 3 things: either to either to do business here in Bangalore, or either to have your part of your team sit out of Bangalore for cost purposes, or they're looking for right kind of partners whom you would want to take from here to do business in the European market. So I think these are the broadly 3 areas which I think would kind of interest you, and we would, or at least I would like to kind of talk mostly on these 3 areas, so that there's a perspective to what we're talking about. So Bangalore is a very interesting test bed, so to say, for us. At least for me, it strongly comes out as a test bed for your early adopters, or you're building your MVP, you're wanting to test something out. It's got a very interesting cosmopolitan culture, which I don't think any other city in the country has so far. If you want to try, especially anything that you want to try out in the Asian markets, either it is Singapore, either it's Hong Kong, either it's a Southeast Asian market, or anywhere else for that matter, because most of them have already developed, and the cost is not the same as what it is, developing something here in Bangalore. So that way, I think Bangalore becomes a very interesting strategic point to have a base in, especially when it comes to talent, especially when it comes to testing the culture out, especially when it comes to getting to see how the Asian market reacts to what you're trying to build. At a fraction of a cost that you would incur if you were to go out and do it in markets like Singapore or in Hong Kong or any other Asian markets for that matter. And Bangalore has a very strong research and development background for the last 2-3 decades, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Because the research mostly was funded through the army and the military services, who were putting in a lot of money into developing cutting edge technologies, and they were building aircrafts, and they had aircrafts maintenance. They had ISRO, which is one of our rocket launching system, one of our organizations based out of Bangalore. So a lot of R&D has always been based out of pure sciences, physics, tech, engineering. All of these have been based out of here for the whole country. So that kind of developed a very interesting culture of understanding technology, science, investing in a lot of education. A lot of organizations came, a lot of education institutions were set up here in Bangalore, mostly because to serve and cater to these organizations that were based out of here. But then again, education got privatized, and a lot more private institutions came and set up shop here in India, in Bangalore especially, which kind of created more than 200 odd engineering and institutions in India, sorry, in Bangalore at one point in time. The time in Bangalore was actually getting to become a startup hub or a software hub, so to say. So that kind of took Bangalore into a global map, and has developed a lot of ecosystem after that. Either it is about financial ecosystem or it is about cultural ecosystem. I think we've been doing a lot since then. A lot of money and foreign exchange has flown in because of that, and a lot of people have now gotten into a situation where they are reinvesting the money back into the ecosystem. So that's pretty much the reason why Bangalore has got the kind of traction that it has in startups today, because of the couple of generations behind. People did something interesting in science and tech, and they made some money, and they came back into India. They plowed all their money back into the local ecosystem. Now the young kids who have gotten some engineering degrees or whatever, dropouts of the colleges, are coming back and trying and testing their ideas out. So that's, I think, what makes Bangalore very unique compared to any other cities that you might want to think of in India. It's kind of strongly concentrated towards technology and anything to do with trying out new things. As I talked about, early adoption is one more thing. Interestingly, also Bangalore has become off late a bootstrap destination for a lot of startups that are based out of Europe and the US, because I also was reading, apart from the top 20 destinations, there was also a list that had come out about how expensive it is to bootstrap a company in the Valley or in Israel, Tel Aviv, or in Chile or any other places in the world. They are all getting very expensive, to bootstrap for a very hardworking entrepreneur. So Bangalore becomes a very interesting destination there, because you can have your core strategy team based out of wherever you are at the initial stages, but you can have a small engineering team based out of Bangalore, which is doing your product design or any other design for that matter. And you can do your testing. You can kind of see the how the community behaves or rather reacts to your products before you go and launch it in the main markets like the US or the Europe markets. So the fraction of the cost is very, very minimal compared to if you have to sit down in Switzerland or in Berlin or in Hamburg and do this bootstrapping. So these are the few things I think the points that I want to quickly touch upon. Just to add to what Sartaj is talking about, it's just not about technology revolution alone for an India standpoint right now, because India has become a very strong consumption market, and there is the one single most factor that is driving everything is urbanization. McKinsey released a report saying that there are about 20 new cities that are going to get formed in India by 2020, which did not exist so far. These are not cities growing bigger. These are about the tier 2, tier 3 cities becoming big cities right now. So that you can imagine 20 more new cities getting added into India is a huge consumption base, so to say. Urbanization is kind of pushing a lot of different growth markets, like real estate, or it could be agriculture, food consumption, food processing, transportation, energy requirement. You talk about schooling, anything that you can think of. Urbanization is one thing that is driving the entire growth. With 20 new more cities coming into this country, I think there's a lot to consume and a lot to do, especially for businesses who are doing some interesting things in Europe and who are looking at doing similar things here in India. And it's just not about agri alone. As I said, it's about lifestyle. People are traveling a lot. All of a sudden, there's a lot of disposable income sitting around with the Indian youth who is now wanting to go out and travel and spend the kind of money that they want to spend to see the world. So there's quite a lot of interesting development happening there as well. There's so many new markets that have come out in the last decade or so, which did not even exist in this country's radar for I don't know how long now. And the interesting thing, I think, for the startup ecosystem especially, which I want to kind of mention before I log off, or rather before I shut up, is how startups were very focused towards scaling up for the last 5 to 6 years in the local market. Everybody wanted the traction. Everybody wanted to get a piece of the market share. People were defining market shares when they were going out and starting new companies and new verticals. I think that kind of has evolved and gone into the next level, where people are now saying that, hey, listen, we have done what we have done here in Bangalore right now or in India right now. Let's go and try and see if we can do something in the Southeast, European markets, right? Or we can go and do something in the in the Asian markets, other markets as well. So people are now looking at scaling out. So why I'm saying this is because when they are looking at scaling out, a lot of startups are looking for interesting people to partner up in the local markets. Right, so one of the things that we keep always doing is experimenting how we can take the ecosystem from Bangalore and connect to somebody else there in Berlin or in Zurich or in Hamburg for that matter, especially in the European market. I think that need is very strong right now. I can say about 10 or 15 startups in the last quarter or so have gone into the European markets, have gone into the the Nordic markets and other Asian markets. So there could be an interesting opportunity for people who are sitting out of there, looking at startups sort of here, taking them to the European markets as well. So yeah, this is broad strokes of what's going on here, and I think we're open to take any more questions.
Okay, before we take questions from the audience, once again you could use the tool GoToWebinar. There's a question section, and now we take your questions for the next 40 minutes, 35 minutes to be precise. Before we take questions from the audience, I want to ask you on two themes. One is the people factor that you were talking about, the young India, the mean age of India, according to some stats, is 26.5 years. You briefly touched upon it. The number of graduates coming out, especially in Bangalore, is very, very high. You touched upon the number of educational institutes, engineering, management, as well as research. So this has been a hub for many, many years. And now the private players are coming and making it more bigger, amplifying the effect. So in terms of people, I want to touch upon the Construkt Festival and the TEDx, which you started, and it has sort of grown on people. There were a lot of volunteers, a lot of young students coming there. Somebody is in bachelor's, somebody is in master's, somebody is taken out time completely out of their projects. So what's that magic happening in Bangalore? What's your take on it? Maybe one by one, each of you.
Sure. Okay, so I'll start. I was involved in both, so I saw it, and it was very interesting because we found people even to come from different cities to say, hey, I want to be a part of this. This is so much bigger. So I think one thing that, and this is again something which is generational, people are running after purpose also. They're saying it's fine if I don't make some money out of this right now, but I see the growth, I see the bigger vision behind this in a couple of years perhaps, and I want to buy into that vision. That wasn't there a few years ago, last generation. That's something new. That's the ambition speaking. The second part is they see the ecosystem. They see that if you jump into that ecosystem and you show what you're worth, something happens. So a real world example is at least 3 or 4 people from Construkt Festival, people interacted, partnered with certain people and hired them. That really happened. There was job conversions happening from really displaying that, hey, this is what you can put in as a volunteer, what can you put out as an employee? I want to know. And that really translated. So I think events are turning out to be like testing beds almost, as, hey, leave my CV, this is what I can do this in the real world, and this is my test. What happens, right? What next?
Which means in terms of talent, the intellectual capital that exists in India, and that's what it's sort of talking about, touching upon the startup vibe of young Bangalore. So if a Swiss startup has in mind to start interacting with the intellectual capital that exists, this is the right time.
Absolutely.
Because the students are not just in the old school, we're not just looking to get a job and get into a multinational, but they're willing to work a little bit extra, get recognized, stick their neck out and work with a startup.
It's very interesting because there is a mix of both. We only keep interacting with a lot of people in the startup ecosystem who's willing to give an arm and a leg to be a part of something. At the same time, there are a lot of people who are sitting behind their computers in their offices, sitting in one organization for the last 5, 6, 7 years and dedicated doing what they're doing. So there's a combination of both these kinds of people. It's interesting, what you just brought about, because it's all kind of dots back to the socio-economic change that is going on in this country, right? Because people are not self-sufficient to a large extent right now, where you don't have to stop your you get out of your college and immediately take up a job. If I have to take up a job, I don't need to take up a job that keeps me 10 hours at a job, right? I can pick up a 2 hours, 3 hours job. I can become a photographer. I can become an artist. I can still make my money and I can still go about pursuing what I want to pursue, right? That is what is driving this entire cultural change, if you ask me. And as Sartaj was talking about it, so a lot of interesting people who came to volunteer with us ended up finding very interesting jobs with very interesting startups. And those people, the founders of these businesses, were so happy to have them with them. Otherwise, they would have not found the kind of dedication that you can never kind of put down X number of dollars on the table and buy.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of interesting trend that is going on. And I think once upon a time, a very interesting guy, a gentleman who's done a lot of interesting work in the clean tech space, had told me, saying that especially this is like social capital, right? You got to invest into the ecosystem when you don't need it, right? Because it's like a savings bank, you can withdraw it at a time when you really want it. So this is like that. It's like building a social capital. Keep doing things, know people, keep giving when you have the chance to give. There will be a chance and a time when you can take it back also. Awesome. I think that's what the culture that is driving a lot of these people.
A lot of people are saying, I'm willing to put in 80 hours a week to avoid the 40 hours a week.
Exactly. Behind the desk.
Okay, and that brings me to the second topic, which I want to know from both of you. The number of domains you mentioned, socio-economy that is growing. So before answering the question, would you please touch upon the numbers? I think they were TEDx Bangalore was the biggest TEDx that happened in India, about 1,500 people attending it, and Construkt this year was larger than the first year, which was Startup Festival. Began as a concept last year. This year it was Construkt Festival. There were about 10,000 footfalls happening.
The entire ecosystem, if you have to not concentrated in one place, but the number of people we
spread
touched
across
upon
the city
through various mediums.
Sure. So the question that I want to ask you is, Bangalore is no longer just the outsourcing capital of the world, and it's not just IT. The way Construkt was designed, you were touching upon 4 different domains. So would both of you please throw some light on it? Also TEDx, there were different topics, and the spirit of Bangalore was really showcased there. And what makes Bangalore tick for Swiss startups? And if you would just touch upon these different domains that are springing about in Bangalore.
Once somebody interestingly told me that the one thing that is so easy in this country is to put a crowd together. So please don't go by these numbers of 10,000
people.
There's a lot of people around in this. If you come, I don't know if you guys have been here, but if you walk on the streets, you'll see it. And there are a lot of people, so getting 10,000 people is not very difficult. But saying that, I think, sorry, I forgot the question.
The domains.
Yeah, so we talked about 4 domains, I think, which kind of represents the ecosystem and the culture of Bangalore. One domain that we strongly focused on was the makers, the hackers, and the technology community. So these are the 3 communities that are kind of rolled into one. So it's become like one community right now. That's one community. And the second one we looked at was a design community, because Construkt basically sits at the intersection of design and technology. That's what we are trying to kind of achieve. How do we cross-pollinate these two, and that's what we feel that the future of the business are going to be like, right? The third one is social impact, which I'm sure Sartaj can talk a lot about because he's deeply involved in that space. Because there are a lot of social projects that are going on in this country. Social impact is one vertical that we have to focus. There's a lot of money coming in, there's a lot of good work getting done here, so they all need platforms. So we are looking at very strongly focusing those areas. And obviously the last one is the culinary space, mostly because food is a big problem, right? So 1.2 billion people, and you need food, and there are a lot of innovation that's going on in the food industry, especially about all the way at the farm end till the way
supply chain,
at the front end, right? Also at the shelf end, at the market end. Big box retailers are coming in, online retailers becoming very big these days, and gourmet shops are coming out all of the places. A lot of import stuff is coming, especially there's a huge market for the pastas and the cheese and the sauces and things like that. So the market's really big. So we focused on these 4 segments that kind of reflects Bangalore ecosystem, so to say. I mean, if we were to do the same thing in another city like Chennai or Bombay, I think we would be doing differently. We would be looking at media, we would be looking at films. If you would be doing it in Chennai, you would be looking at automobiles. If you were doing it in Delhi, you probably look at different industries as such. It is merely a representation of what Bangalore ecosystem is like.
Yeah. I think we tried to do the same thing at TEDx Bangalore also. We took a slightly more inclusive approach, saying, okay, what's the narrative of the city? The narrative of the city, at least according to us, was challenge dash, which was saying what will be challenged now? Again, a representation or manifestation of that ambition. And as Shashi rightly mentioned, I think that social capital, that social impact is what we wanted to sort of centered around. And we said, okay, if that triple bottom line is very important now, what can we do to highlight or showcase that, especially because with CSR coming in and this recent development of CSR being compulsory at 2%, and it's mandatory that you give 2% of your net profit if you're above a certain size and plow it back to sort of community initiatives. All of this sort of pointed us to a direction where we said, okay, now it's become important enough for us to have a conversation about these issues which are mainstream. And I think that is another sign of the maturity that the ecosystem has reached, where we're saying, okay, we've like Maslow's needs, we've furnished a lot of our needs. We're becoming from developing to developed. We're fairly developed now, at least in this nascent ecosystem already in Bangalore, and you're saying, okay, now we need to think about the future. Hence, things like CSR become important. That conversation is becoming important. Where previously we were just an aid nation, where we just used to receive money, it used to be used, and that kept going on. And we've recently even gotten off the WHO list, and in terms of the UN list, where we're saying that we are not a priority nation anymore for capital, which is sort of aid, because we don't need it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. We have 2 questions which I picked from the GoToWebinar tool. One is, which of these domains which we just talked about are saturated for Swiss startups? And the second question is, which is the stage, if you talk about the way Switzerland looks at startup support and coaching system is -1 to 3. So which stage is ripe for them to come look at Bangalore? So
second question, repeat, I didn't get the question.
The stage of startup, so -1 ideation stage, 0 is when they start incorporating and start working, prototyping, and then 1 to 3 years. So -1 to 3 years. So first question is, which of the domains are saturated, the ones that we talked about, and the second is which age, which timeline is apt for a Swiss startup to.
Saturation, I don't know. if any market has really saturated yet, I don't
India
think
is hard to saturate anything.
It's tough to saturate for the next 10 years to come. I think there's quite a lot of opportunity. As one thing that Sartaj touched upon is the Maslow's hierarchy, right? So we're kind of taking care of all the basics to a certain extent. Now it's all about moving up and trying to try different things. So that way, I don't think saturation has hit us yet. One of the most interesting verticals that have just opened up in this country is politics. I think that's one of the huge opportunity that has opened up of late. So you can imagine how nascent the entire market is still to a large extent. What stage can a startup look at coming into this country?
Bangalore specifically.
Bangalore specifically, yeah. It again depends on the need, right? So I kind of broadly touched upon the various reasons why you might want to come to this country, or what this region might be interesting to you. Either it is to have a small team here to save money, to bootstrap and increase your runway if you're a startup. So any time is good time. Even if before you go out and put up your engineering team, you can actually outsource your MVP to a product design firm here, and who can give you a rough cut for you to play around with, and so you can start at that level. If you are looking at coming into this market, we are typically assuming that you would be at least about a couple of years into business, right? Coming to strategic growth and scale and things like that. So obviously that answers your question. If you're in the range of 0 to 2 years, I think that's the best place to come. That's the right time to come. And what else? Is there anything else?
So if I have to add, I would say I would avoid e-commerce, just because that space is really not saturated, but the players involved are so deeply entrenched that and there are certain nuances to this particular market, like cash on delivery, logistics nightmares, that I think I wouldn't advise people right now to enter, because that's really, people are saying people have bet on the winners and people are now showing strength. So that's one place I would totally avoid. However, but niche e-commerce could work.
Just to add to that, before you continue, but if you'd like to sell a product through these e-commerce portals,
that's massive. So channels,
you could piggyback on these.
That's interesting. I think that has established right now. Even before you go out and do something on your own, you could just do a small little test into the market by launching it with these guys. And then maybe you can kind of go on your own or launch your own offline products and things.
And there is very good support for bringing in or importing these Swiss products into India.
That's very, I think, standardized.
I think when I say e-commerce, I just meant massive chains like say Amazon. So you don't build the next Amazon, but sure, piggyback on it. And also there's a lot of niche e-commerce that's going on right now in terms of fashion, in terms of, again, like you said, gourmet food, so wine. So all of these things are really that the channels are being built and they can be exploited.
The basic infrastructure is set up, yeah.
And in terms of age, I would just say that 0 to 3, right? That point. If you're coming in at 0, I'm thinking you have everything established. You'd get into that sort of dual axis of power, where the engineering is here, maybe the design is there. It's really a marriage between you're saying that, okay, we want to partner and exploit this cost advantage that comes in. If you're at year 1, you're essentially maybe building something for the circle of humanity, this mass population in Southeast Asia. And if you're in year 2 and 3, I'm just thinking of looking for new markets and just looking for that organic scaling, or even internationalize, or even just acquisition perhaps, because there are a lot of technology coming out here that's ripe for taking over and just expanding. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Another question is, how are the skills and work ethics of employees in Bangalore and also generally in India? And this is specific to startups.
Having traveled a bit and spoken to quite a lot of different cultures, it's not bad. At the same time, everybody's not good, right? So you've got to be cautious. Work through the known channels, get some strong references, because I think this market strongly works on references. People are happy to open up references. You ask one, they will be more than happy to kind of share those contacts. I think one great organization and somebody who's doing great work is Prateek and his team here at SwissNex in Bangalore. I think these are the best guys to talk to. They can put you in touch with the right people who will not take you for a ride. Avoid random internet-based interactions and going into partnerships. I think we are not yet there as a services-based culture. We're not yet there. I don't think you can do that like the way you probably would do it in China. Work ethics, we are very hardworking as such as a nation. I think that is something which is pretty straightforward. Has been established over a period of time. We are structure in chaos that shows on the streets to where we live and to what we do and how we do things. If you're used to playing that cultural angle, I think it's pretty simple and easy. We're nothing like clockwork. We're completely all over the place, but we will get the job done. Motivating factors depends on the kind of people you're interacting with. Money is predominantly a motivating factor if you're looking at expanding your team or hiring people or giving a designation kind of a role. Motivation is a strong factor if you're looking at getting somebody into a core team and getting them at a founding team and things like that, or a strong partnership that you want to build in this country. I think motivation and that click, it's the soft side of relationship building which really matters a lot, according to me at least.
So for me, I think when you're hiring, at least in India, there are two challenges. One is recruitment. So if you're a really good opportunity, you will get too many people, and just that having the ability to filter and wade through that application pool is something not very easy. Hence, Shashi had mentioned go through referral channels. Also, like I said, just don't look at a CV and presume skill level, talent level. Hence, there are even startups here trying to solve that, saying like, okay, we'll do like a demo coding session for you. We'll show our worth again, right? Because really, just paper credentials don't really work here. That's one thing I found, and the other is management structure. So I think Indians work, I think, fairly well under a pyramidal sort of structure. They may not be too used to a flat hierarchy, and if you want to extract, I guess, the best out of your employees and your team, I think just having or establishing that rapport with them at the earliest becomes very important, because if you push people, they will work beyond what money dictates sometimes just to get the job done, because they have this personal relationship and this ethos that they're working towards. Sure. And that's something to cultivate.
Absolutely.
And that can only come from getting the right people through the right channels.
Yeah. So building relationships with the employees is the first suggestion here.
Yeah.
And in terms of startups, spending some time with the people. So we had previously a webinar with Dr. Bal Strasser, who's the CEO at SwissNex, and he apparently built his own startup that was importing cashews from Kerala. So he spent a lot of time with his partner in Kerala, in conditions which Swiss people living in Switzerland will not be able to picture. So it's not that the conditions are bad, it's in the nature, in the heart of nature.
Exactly.
Kerala is very picturesque, yes. But what he suggests as a Swiss individual who ran a successful startup importing from India is that you spend some time with the people who you want to work with, build that trust, build that relation, see how they live, see what they eat, be with them throughout to really understand and build that rapport like both of you were suggesting.
See, I think technology space is quite straightforward if you ask me, because a lot of culturally speaking, a lot of things are in place. I mean, if you're coming into, say, for example, selling whatever food nutrients into an agri space, that's a completely different space. Right? There are quite a lot of Israeli companies and Dutch players have come in, and now they've cracked that code as well, where they're selling the seeds, they're selling the fertilizers, they're selling a lot of these stuff into farmlands as well. There also, it is not as systematic as the way it is here in the technology space, but things are getting slowly better. Read the market, understand it, meet a lot of people. People are open to meet and talk and share. That is something which we're not too worried about, the so-called intellectual property and things like that. So.
Okay, just to add to that question, assuming that when our question asker talks about what ethics of employees in Bangalore is, if you're working with a Indian startup as a partner, and let's say you've given a deadline, or you agreed on a deadline, would you recommend certain things to be included? You were saying a paper value doesn't work, but when you're working closely as an associate, as a partner, equal or unequal, would you recommend some things for a completely Indian or let's say Bangalore-based startup that is building that technology piece of the product or service?
Okay.
Would you have some recommendations for the Swiss counterparts?
What kind of business are you talking about?
Assume a product on the cloud. A SaaS
tech business.
Yeah.
So you asking me who the partners could be?
No, I'm asking
what is the
recommendation? Yes.
What kind of paperwork you need to look at?
Yeah, and the kind of relation, the work ethics, the punctuality.
I think that is pretty established. It's global if you ask me these days. I think those standards. I think thanks to the as I said, the software industry, the IT industry that has kind of driven that that system into the city very strongly. Those things are in place. You've got interesting lawyers who will do your paperwork, which is watertight, holds good in any markets, holds good in any code of law. The people who are doing things here, they also are aware of SLAs and timelines and and deadlines and things like that. It is not completely uncontrolled. It's not completely uncontrolled, but you will have to do a little bit of micromanagement compared to what you would probably do for a team sitting in your country, because you might know that a little bit of pressure always helps to see, hey, there's something going on, let me just be on time delivering this. Apart from that, I think legal system and corporate law and monetary systems and federal law, everything is in
100%. Like for example, a lot of the companies here, in terms of IP, even SLAs, they're perfectly valid. Some people, to be doubly sure, introduce dual jurisdictions of their home nation so that they're extra safe and secure in that. But as you said, why get into the legal aspect of it all when you can just micromanage and handle the human aspect? So we've seen things like, if you just put the pressure on, just follow up, say, every week instead of just the day before, right? That just knows that the other person, that okay, this person is involved in the process, is not outsourced it. It's a partnership here.
Exactly. That is what I was coming at. So I'll take example of one of the startups that used the swissnex India's services. It's a CTI level startup, and the Swiss founder actually took time to build a working relation with the Indian counterpart, and then they became co-founders. So this Indian co-founder now will run the operations here. And there's that bridge that has been built, the cultural bridge, the human aspect of things. They understand each other's value system. It's different, yes, but I think there are many, like you were mentioning, there are these soft landing platforms that exist in Bangalore, which don't exist necessarily everywhere else in the world, and that is what makes us unique.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We do not have any question right now, so I'll take this opportunity to ask you another question. We were talking about this the expenditure, the ability to spend more. I don't get the right word, but there is this 300 million middle class people in India, and there is also more youngsters now coming up and spending their traveling around the world. The people from Silicon Valley, the Indians, for example, who went to the Silicon Valley, had some wealth, and they are now coming back, either becoming venture capitalists in Bangalore or founding their own companies. And the message that we as swissnex India deliver in Switzerland to Swiss startups is that when the world is looking at Silicon Valley, the people from Silicon Valley are actually coming to Bangalore. So why do you want to make that long route to Silicon Valley and then come to Bangalore? Why don't you make a direct route?
I think we've been talking about it. I think Sartaj and I have discussed this concept for a very long time right now. Is about there was a time when evolution, societies used to evolve in pockets, right? So in geographies, and people would evolve as a country. I think today the evolution has become, thanks to technology and many other things, evolution has become a concept which is very democratized. Right? You can be evolved sitting out of a city like Bangalore, and your IQ levels or knowledge levels could be at par with somebody sitting out of the valley. Right? So thinking is similar, and problem solving abilities are similar, opportunity and trend spotting are similar. So that has now kind of made things a very level playing field. So it really doesn't matter, honestly speaking, if you're sitting out of Bangalore sometime, or if you're sitting out of Zurich, or if you're sitting out of Hamburg or Valley, it's all the same. The state of mind, I think, should be towards the market where you're trying to solve the problem. Right? There are a lot of social businesses which Sartaj knows sitting out of Bangalore trying to solve problems for Africa.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of people doing very interesting things, in innovation that is coming out of Africa that is at play in Middle Eastern markets. So that has kind of, I think, leveled that myth about wanting to be in the valley, or should I have be in the American market or in the heart of the European markets to be able to survive. I think obviously this is, I'm talking about businesses like technology related businesses and products, technology products and things like that. So I think that kind of is taken care to a large extent right now.
I think I completely agree with him. I think if people are going for the valley, sure, it's great for certain things, networking, building some contacts, maybe attracting some investment. But I think India in particular and the East, which is where the focus has been for the past 2 decades, earlier manufacturing, now we're moving into more, say, nuanced and sort of niche services, has been that, hey, there's a value proposition that this location gives. You're closer to your customers, the customers, there's a growing market, which is, while the other is a stagnating or a flat market. So there are certain advantages that this geography brings to you, and it's more about, okay, either you sell to this market, you develop it in this market, or you just just reverse it from this market. So reverse innovation. So either you do all these things. So the location, I'm not saying Silicon Valley is less important now, but it has a different purpose, and I think people should be smart enough to realize what that purpose is and within their context of their businesses, and exploit the national synergies.
Awesome. I have to stop asking my question because there's another question from our audience. How is the venture capital VC scene in Bangalore for pitching startups, and also for an Indian living in Switzerland here? I think the second bit I will take up. If you both could please put light on. If you could show light on both the ventures.
See, I think even in the investment market, I think there is a particular trend, right? So you typically look at debt-based financing to start with. You probably borrow from a few people. That's how you start when the ecosystem is evolving, or rather it's starting to kind of bud. Then you have some banks that are also churning out a few investment arms which are in the equity-based investment, or you would probably have some small little HNI coming in and putting some money in for equity. And then you would probably have these venture capitalists who are firms that are operating professionally as venture capitalists coming down and setting up shops. And obviously after that would be your seeds and your angels and super angels and things like that. So Bangalore as a market is now, or India as a market for startups right now, is at an angel, super angel stage, a robust angel, super angel stage. So why I'm giving you this context is because it's evolved. Most of the firms that you would see everywhere else in the world who are doing professional VC-based investments has a presence here, has a desk here, or has an office here. Now there are a lot of individuals who are opening up their wallets and putting money in as seed investors and angel investors. So investment as such is not a challenge. Money has never been a challenge if you have the right cause and the idea that you would want to talk about. The other point you wanted to, do you have anything?
So I'll just add to this, but I think investment in India, the only caveat is that it's traction based. So people want much more demonstrable traction than in other markets. The other thing is also, I know for a fact that we have very robust angel, super angel system right now, because we have from the government itself legal machinery. We have something along the lines of saying you need to be above, say, $50,000 disposable income to be called even an angel, right? So if the government is at that level, I know we are there because enough interest has been peaked. The other thing is, we have the Sequoias, we have the Kleiner Parkins, we have Axel, we have a lot of these international VCs already here. They've been here for actually the longest, a decade easily. So from that perspective, we are mostly taken care of. But as I said, demonstrable traction is the main caveat.
Yeah, so you will not get money if you're at the idea stage. I mean, you would get money if you have gotten
some traction or some also the fact that if you've previously done this. So if you're a serial entrepreneur, that obviously allows people to give you the confidence saying, okay, I believe in you, here's the money. Yeah.
Okay. All right, the second bit, as an Indian living in Switzerland, if I get it right, I'll check once again. As an Indian living in Switzerland, yes, I'll tell you three routes. One is swissnex India, which is a government of Switzerland. We are SBFI's outpost in India. And our mandate is to help Swiss startups. So, which means that if you registered your startup in Switzerland and you could begin a conversation with us, and we help you with every stage, handhold you into the Indian market. We make introduction to our network, including these two individuals and the ones that they were talking about, the HNIs, the angel investors, the venture capitalists of the world. The second is once you registered your startup in Switzerland, you could speak to CTI, who are actually sponsoring this webinar, who coach and help Swiss startups to internationalize. And a Swiss startup that wants to internationalize can speak to any of the Swissnexes, including Swissnex San Francisco, Boston, China, and us in Bangalore, depending on which country you want to internationalize into. And that's the other route. And the third route is the Indian successful businessmen who are living now in Switzerland for many years. They have some capital that they want to invest, and we can make that informal introduction through that route. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 more minutes, maybe time enough for one more question. If you don't have any question, then I can ask another one to these gentlemen. I'll wait. We'll wait for one more question in the next 2 minutes, and then we wind up in the next 5 minutes. Until we have that question coming, I want to ask you to throw some light on the support ecosystem. That is something that we've been telling in Switzerland, is that Bangalore has this unparalleled support system. People are willing to go out of their way to even share their not just success story but also failure stories, very openly, very bravely. People are willing to help through, like you were saying, the skill exchange. There are these open coffee clubs, there are these meetups, the festivals that you guys have created. Also, every Friday, every Saturday, every Tuesday, there's a board game meetup for gaming, there's a design meetup on Saturdays. Could you please just throw some light on what evolved? You sort of touched upon this, the evolution of Bangalore every 10 years, every 15 years, and something that you guys brought about, the evolution from a Silicon Valley of India to startup capital of India. So if you could just throw some light on what is so different here in the ecosystem, the support that exists at top level to individual levels, the people who go out of the way to help.
I think it's in a culture to share, especially anything to do with knowledge. It's always been kind of, upbringing. The values are, share your books, share your knowledge. If you know something, free education, free training, and things like that, right? So it's always been in our culture very strongly to share knowledge, and more so if it's experiential knowledge, you want to share more. you want to obviously talk more about it. So that has given birth to a very strong giving culture, right? That kind of becomes your mentors, or you're building a product, you get stuck somewhere, you know somebody who can solve this problem, pick up the phone, call him. He will actually come solve you the problem and not even expect you to give him money but buy him a beer. That's about it. So that level of the culture is now at that level where they're willing to share. They co-create things. They're willing to share things, and they're willing to come and do things together, even at a strategic level, if it means partnering with organizations and things like that. There are multiple organizations. Think about any industry that you look at. If you're looking at a very broad,
sector,
very broadly startup-related activities. There is an organization called NASSCOM, which is doing very strong work in the software-related, product-related ecosystem. If you're looking very generic, there is another called TIE, called the Indus Entrepreneurs, which is a global network in over 60 odd countries. If you're looking at semiconductor alone, then there is an organization called India Semiconductor Association, which takes care of a lot of these very domain-specific work.
Manufacturing.
Yeah. There are FICCI, there is CII, which is more at a very advanced, grown businesses that are looking
Confederation
at
of
Indian industries, and so these are the organizations which take care of organizations at a very high level, needs federal clearances and things like that. So that gets through those routes. Food and agri, I think it's a very strong network. I think that supply chain is not a very strong strength of India, but the knowledge sharing and these levels of ecosystems have been very strongly built for especially food and agri businesses. I think pretty much ecosystem is nicely mapped out. It's a one click away. You can go, it's an open desk, you talk to people. They organize a lot of events every week. There are a lot of webinars like these going on. There are a lot of mentoring camps that happen where people are coming and bringing in domain specific knowledge and sharing it for free. So I think that way the ecosystem is pretty robust.
Yeah, it's pretty well covered, I think, and the interesting part is it's not temporary, it's pretty long lasting in terms of we've seen this whole culture of the thank you economy, right, where that's what it takes, and they realize the fact that someone else, it's not a zero-sum game, your win doesn't equate to my loss, and because it's partly driven bottom up, that's been institutionalized through the support mechanics. So some people in the valley were doing it on a pro bono basis, one-on-one, a decade ago. They just thought, okay, let's band together and build this out as a larger support network, and that's how TIE evolved, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the story with all of these things. To give an example, BLR Startups Group, right? That started out just as a meetup group, but now has evolved into things like, okay, point me to a designer, point me for hiring, point me for events. So it's become this macro body, and although it's just 4 years old, it's already become 10,000 strong, and it's almost institutionalized for all practical purposes. There are rules, there are processes, there's a decorum. So I think it's just cultural, but it's now ingrained at a point where people can rely on it.
Awesome. That brings us to the close of this webinar. The webinar recording will shortly be available for those who missed it, and we'll send this out as a news flash to most possible Swiss startups in Switzerland. Also, CTI will help us elaborate this message. Before we close, one last word from both of you. Why should Swiss startups be looking at Bangalore as a destination, either for intellectual capital or as a market? One reason.
Yeah, I think because this is the closest you can get to have a very well robust first world entrepreneurial ecosystem that you can look for in this side of the world, especially in this country. You talked about talent, you talked about money, you talked about all of these things, and it's a growing market. So most importantly, we stopped being a market which was producing things for external consumption and started becoming a market that is consuming internally also, which is a huge market. Talked about urbanization and things like that, right? So it's a huge consumption market. So more the reason why you should be here, irrespective of whatever kind of business you are involved in. So I think economy is the only reason why you should be here. Consumption market.
Thank you, Shashi. Sartaj, your take?
For me, it's like if you want the most easily available, the market which is easiest to tap, which has the highest demand from a native perspective, right? You're not even looking at what if you scale to other countries. This is it. If you capture this, you have 30% of the world with you in one fell sweep, and it's available to you, right? There's no walls here.
Yeah.
So that's the real hook.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Shashi. Thank you so much, Sartaj, for being with us today. Whatever questions come our way on our email innovation@swissnexindia.org, I will be happy to pass on them to you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Prateek. I head the startup services for the Swiss government in Bangalore, India. Thank you for being with us tonight for this webinar series.